It's deeply rooted in our culture. We say it over and over, so much that it has become common wisdom. It's like when you're bathing in your own shit for too long that you can't even smell it anymore. What I'm talking about here is a saying that kind of goes like this: anything is possible if you just put in the effort and believe in yourself. Sounds like a positive message to put out because we should definitely take actions for our own lives. However, the reality is that our successes and failures depend on so many factors outside of our control that it would be quite foolish to believe that we're 100% responsible for who and what we are. During an interview, Will Storr, the author of Selfie, How We Became So Self-Obsessed and What It Is Doing to Us, stresses the fact that we are shaped by our culture but often led to think that we have the free will to decide what we believe in. It is quite challenging to come in terms with how much our mind is conditioned by our culture, but the author explains why it is liberating to accept that as a truth. If I quote him, "It was quite humbling to realize just how much I'm a puppet of the culture in which I grew up, how my attitudes were shaped by forces over which I had no control. I think it also makes you less likely to blame others for their faults, and it actually encourages you to be more compassionate of others." Again, taking a look at our current culture, self-made millionaires, the next big tech in Silicon Valley, is what's mediatized the most, which further enhances the narrative of self-made success. Those stories are followed by shit tons of blueprints and seminar that claims to unlock your true potential to achieve your goals, and that taints our image of what success is about. We are presented with examples resulting from the survivorship bias, so we only see those who actually makes it, but not those who have failed to do so. I'm not saying that all self-help is entirely bad, because it's still better than just blaming everything else. But once you've gone down that rabbit hole of self-improvement, it might have this side effect of making yourself even more self-absorbed. Side note, I just want to point out that blaming everything isn't the same thing as discussing the issues of our society, and that distinction is to justify my complaining ass. Now, let's take a step back from the individual level and observe this ideology under the collective lens. When you group a bunch of individuals together with a shared vision to sell on the market, we have what we typically call a business. Running a business is challenging and you definitely need to have a strong mindset, so it's probably not made for everyone. Then again, there are alternative approaches to a top-down organizational structure, so it's not the only good way to run a company. I'm going to pull this number out of my ass, but if you ask any top executives, probably 80% of them will tell you that they have read self-help. Even the employees. As previously mentioned, when exploring self-help, an individual may become more self-absorbed and will try to improve every single one of their behavior, which can affect their happiness. This kind of mindset under the context of a company is usually what drives someone's career advancement in the traditional sense, which is going up the ladder. You need to keep track of your accomplishment and be acknowledged for them, because if you don't get that acknowledgement, you may feel resentful. In either case, you have to prove yourself and be noticed, or sell yourself to others. Self-promotion is rewarded more often than not. Again, if I quote the interview mentioned earlier, it says that an individual narcissist is someone with a deep need for validation, someone who thinks they're great and resents anyone who doesn't recognize their greatness. If you observe that on a macro scale, like a corporation, this translates to the phenomenon of collective narcissism. Collective narcissism is defined by a group of people who have the tendency to exaggerate their positive image and importance. Having that said, these realizations and definition led me to believe that the corporate world slowly turns you into a narcissist. If I want to be less clickbait with my claim, and since narcissism isn't a binary trait, I could say instead that the corporate world plays a role as a catalyst of narcissistic behaviors. But from this point forward, I will put more emphasis on this transformative process under the context of our lifespan. It's quite difficult to talk about the topic of work because there's so many different fields, so whatever I'm gonna say will not apply for everyone. What I would like to do is try my best to be as broad as possible. Now let's roll back a little bit in the past and see how this plays out. You were born clean slate, crying cause you didn't ask to be summoned into the mortal world.
Put me back.
Yet, there you are. Quickly, you found yourself going to school where you're surrounded by smarter people than you are, or by absolute complete idiots. Hey! Nonetheless, you eventually begin to compare yourself to others. The pressure of becoming successful and getting a high-paying job haunts you as the living costs become higher while the wages have stagnated. It's probably one of the causes of the rising level of stress amongst students. Whether you enjoy it or not, any extracurricular activities that you do is another occasion to boost your resume. It has become the norm now because to get an entry-level job, you need to have at least 10 years of experience as a senior, on top of being able to shove a cactus up your anus. I'm over-exaggerating, of course, but you're still brought to show off to your interviewers about your achievements. Even there, it's still hard to say because if I was an employer, I would definitely like to work with the right type of people, and maybe the way it is done right now is the right way to filter out applicants. But there's one thing that I have a hard time defending, and it's this sort of vibe or mindset that we are subject to when we're getting an interview. Oh, hi Mr. Tran. Please take a seat. Thank you. Now, tell me more about yourself. So, I grew up in LA as a first generation. Honestly, I don't care. Just tell me how you're better than the other candidates. Tell me why you're the best. We're only ones the cream de la cream because we are amongst the most productive in the world here at Bronzeman Ball Sacks. With that sort of experience, you quickly learn that you really have to sell yourself well. A study in 2013 done by the University of British Columbia shows that narcissists do better in job interviews than equally qualified candidates that comes from a more modest culture. And if you don't get hired, you kind of get this sense of shame. This is a feeling that I've sort of went through after I graduated. I applied to all these places that I thought I would like to work at, and I kept on getting rejected one after another. It's difficult to not get that sense of guilt of not living up to your own standards. There's an author who wrote 5 New York Times bestsellers. Her name is Brené Brown. She went on a podcast with Tim Ferriss, and I'll let you listen to what she has to say about it.
Do you know that narcissism is the most shame-based of all the personality disorders? Narcissism is not about self-love at all. It's about grandiosity driven by high performance and self-hatred. It's, I define it as the shame-based fear of being ordinary.
The way she describes this sense of shame is reflected in the hiring process, because when you get rejected, you're kind of reminded by yourself mostly that you're quite ordinary. We should be accepting to the fact that most of us are going to be average, and that's perfectly normal, and that's okay too. Being compassionate towards yourself isn't the same thing as being complacent. All these reflections occurs before you even get a job, and let's see if those feelings fades away once you actually secure that job. So you get hired and integrate yourself within the team. The business then expands and needs to hire more people to meet the demands. The type of people a company wants to hire will be reflected in how it markets itself. The term given to this personality of this fictitious person, which is the company, is commonly known as corporate culture. I think that it's fair to say that a company's culture is a representation of their leaders. Culture is also there to provide a sense of belonging to the employees, and that affects their level of motivation, which impacts their level of productivity. But here are some stats. In a survey aimed to measure the level of engagement of employees done by the ADP Research Institute in 2018, it claims that only about 16% of employees are fully engaged. This means that 84% of workers are just coming to work instead of contributing all they could to their organizations. I don't think that everyone needs to be fully engaged, but that's a topic for another video. But let's be real, how a company tries to fix this employee engagement problem is by throwing some snacks at them and shouting some buzzwords to make them feel special, and they use that as a proof of great culture. Part of this is because 1, It costs much less to give free beers on a Friday afternoon than to give a better wage for their workers. And two, a lot of people have a soul-sucking job, and since no amount of free alcohol will make them forget about how much bullshit they have to deal with, the company resorts into saying how much they care about you and that you're a rock star. But yes, a good company culture allows someone to strive and have a sense of purpose. But it feels like a lot of the time, companies try to virtue signal way too much. Even a decent company, you'll often find on their website about section something along the line of integrity or value driven. They kind of enjoy bragging about having qualities that we should minimally expect from any good company. But I think that there's a bit of a collective narcissism at play here, something that I've mentioned previously. And that is the belief that a group's grandiosity is not appreciated enough by others. This is partly due to the competitive nature of the market and having to compare themselves with competitors. By being in that sort of environment, it can put you into this tribe mentality where you think your workplace is superior or that you're really a leader in the market. Overall, what I'm trying to get at is that the corporate world is similar to the job searching phase where you have to prove yourself either to get promoted or to get a raise. And I feel like it accentuates the problem of narcissism. My take on it is quite alarmist, but I do still believe that the big corporations have a long way to go before they live up to their claim. What we have to be careful of is to not adopt their rhetoric. One thing I should have mentioned earlier was how narcissism can be a bad thing, but I think we can mostly agree on it. If I make it short, narcissism can affect negatively your relationship, either at home, at work, or even on the internet. It's not part of the dark triad for no reason. I mean, when science puts you in a theory that contains the word dark, I'm not gonna try to mess with that. Although I've bashed a lot on narcissism, there may be some good side to it. It is linked to mental toughness, which can lower your risk of depression and anxiety. But I'd argue that having self-esteem and a good sense of self-awareness is a better approach. So about the problem itself, how do we fix it? To be fair, I don't really know, but I doubt that shouting the word narcissism around and telling that someone is a narcissist would be very helpful. Maybe it would. A better approach would be to look at the root causes of this widespread behavior. One of the causes can be the reduced level of empathy that is potentially associated with the rise of the self-help culture. And another reason could be due to our upbringing. It seems that it is more common for parents to provide support to their children, even if there's no achievement, and praising talent over hard work. Basically, we should just tell our kids that their B pluses are trash and that they are worthless food-hogging piles of turds. That should set them straight. But researchers suggest instead to go with parental warmth over parental overvaluation. I don't know about you, but I feel like my method is pretty legit. Who listens to scientists nowadays, right? This is the part where it gets kinda corny, but practicing mindfulness, facilitating self-acceptance and forgiveness should do a long way in this battle. I'm not a psychologist, and the research I've done did not go super in depth into the scientific publication, so I suggest to take whatever I say with a grain of salt. Anyways, I hope that this video has opened a door into your soul and made you realize that we're all kinda shit. That's all I have to say, so stay cool, stay chill, being hot is overrated. Bye.